All right. So, welcome. My name is Kate Jenkins. I'm the Senior Director of Admissions and Financial Aid here at the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do and what you expect in funding your master's degree here at the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. We're going to talk briefly about some of the folks that you will want to know and how Columbia is sort of structured in terms of the people you'll want to connect with. We'll go over the cost of attendance, what that includes and excludes, and how to think about that, as well as how your registration and the use of our enrollment categories will impact your cost of attendance. We'll talk about the different funding types that you have available, both domestic and international students, including different fellowships and scholarships, how to look for employment on campus when you arrive, as well as some of the loan information. We'll also talk a little bit about the next steps and a bit of a timeline on when you can expect things to happen and when you can expect to get some additional information if you are someone who's looking at borrowing. And then at the end of this session, we will have an opportunity to go over some question and answer. But as we go through the session, please feel free to put any Q&A into the Q&A. And we have other staff members from the financial aid office on hand to answer those questions as we go through. So please put your questions in the Q&A. Also, if you submitted any questions on the RSVP, hopefully we'll get an opportunity to go through those as well. So let's start with the people here at Columbia. Many of you will have already been in contact with the master's program director for your program, or the director of academic administration and finance, and or maybe the director of graduate studies. In some cases, for smaller departments, those all might be one person. But in most cases, there's at least a director of graduate studies and either a program director or a director of academic administration and finance. We refer to those folks as the DAFs and the DGSs, or the MAPD for the master's program director. They are actually the folks who are making any decisions about institutional scholarships. So they will work with you to advise you on how to finish your program, your credits and academic requirements, and help you navigate within your program different resources that might be available. But if you are looking for information about whether or not there are institutional scholarships available for your specific program, we have this master's departmental contact list available on our website and also, again, linked here. Also, here today with you is the entire team of financial aid. So we're a very small team. But we are here to assist you in navigating through any institutional funds that you may have been awarded from your department. Again, financial aid doesn't make the decision about any institutional scholarships. That's done at the departmental level. So if you do have questions about whether or not you may be receiving a scholarship, or you wanted to inquire about the process for scholarship determination within your department, that again is done at the departmental level, so we encourage you to reach out to them. Financial aid will assist you with ensuring that the scholarship that you might have received from your department is applied to your financial aid record, as well as helping you to navigate external scholarship opportunities, or if you're receiving an external scholarship or applying for an external scholarship or fellowship, and that organization requires documentation from the financial aid office about your cost of attendance. That's us. We can help you with that. But the actual determination of any scholarships happens at the departmental level. The funding that's available varies across departments again, so being into contact with your department specifically. Another area of the university at large is Student Financial Services, or SFS. Student Financial Services is the office that creates and bills your tuition and fees. So again, that's not financial aid. We can assist you in understanding that, but there is a dedicated team at the university who manages the billing of your tuition and fees, including on your student account, any housing. If you are in Columbia residential, that's going to be billed. And that team is who determines the billing deadlines, places holds on accounts for students who have not paid their bill on time, places late fees and assesses those, So that's a separate office from financial aid. We do get emails sometimes where students have been reaching out to us, or they believe they've been reaching out to us, but they've actually been reaching out to Student Financial Services. So understand that office is serving the entire university. The financial aid office, our office, is serving just the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences students. So a little bit more information. There are other offices that you may encounter and be in contact with at the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. There's a team within Student Affairs who can help you with registration and information about if, for instance, you needed to take a leave of absence or needed to connect with disability services. That's all within the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences Student Affairs team. Compass is our career services team. So they offer a number of opportunities throughout the year to assist you in developing your resume or doing mock interviews and other sort of writing opportunities. They work as well with the Writing Center, who can assist you in thesis development and offers other writing opportunities to help you from procrastinating and other things throughout the year. And again, there are other teams throughout Columbia that you may encounter. If you're not sure, we are happy to help direct you to the right place. So please feel free to reach out to us if you're not sure if it's the department or Student Financial Services or Student Affairs. We're happy to help connect you with the right team. But there are a number of folks and offices throughout Columbia that you'll work with as you continue through or begin and continue through your degree. So I want to briefly touch on as well how the aid that you have access to is both determined and the amounts that you are eligible to receive, right? In terms of the maximum amounts that you can receive in all kinds of aid. That falls within what's called the cost of attendance or the student financial aid budget. It's synonymous with that. The cost of attendance is made up of two types of costs. Your direct costs, like tuition and fees, as well as health insurance if you're enrolling in the university's health insurance plan. Those costs are billed directly to your student account, and you would be paying the university for those costs. Those costs are typically the same for all students that are in a program. So all master's students who are enrolled full-time in statistics will have the same tuition cost, right? So the direct costs are those that we specifically expect to be billed onto your student account and that you would pay directly to the university. Indirect costs also are part of the cost of attendance, but those are the costs that you may not be billed. Now, if you're in housing, that would be an exception. But there's a set amount that you are eligible to receive in total financial aid that includes these indirect costs. So the financial aid office is tasked with creating this cost of attendance by using the average costs for our student populations over the last several years. So for living expenses, we are looking at the total GSAS population, and there's an average that's calculated by the Central University based on those costs that we have, as well as things like books and supplies, other food and living expenses, right, that are related, your personal expenses. Those are all within one total budget. Now, the indirect costs that we create are the same across the populations of master's students. The direct costs might vary based on your program of enrollment, but everybody has an allocation of the same amount with regard to how much they can borrow for living expenses and personal expenses and books and supplies. That information right now is based on the 25-26 details. We do have some estimates for what we expect for 26-27. The cost of attendance won't be final until June when the Columbia trustees finalize the cost of tuition and fees at the university at large. But if you want to get a sense, there are some cost of attendance details for this year. Some items we do expect to increase, and the example that we provide is based on an estimated increase. In addition to these specific areas, if you go to the cost of attendance page, you can see these estimated costs based on your tuition. You'll notice in the tuition section that there's a difference based on the residence unit, right? So here at the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, you are going to register for both courses and residence units. And your tuition is based on the resident unit that you are enrolled in, or the enrollment category. So there are different enrollment categories. In total, for your degree, you need to combine residence units that come up with a total of 2 for the master's degree. So that could be a full-time residence unit for 2 semesters, or 4 semesters of a half-time residence unit, right? The total just needs to be 2. So this is one of the places where in your total cost of attendance, depending on how you enroll, whether you enroll in a full residence unit or half residence unit, that's going to be the driver of your tuition and fees. So take a look at this information, work with your program. In some cases, your program has a very clear track of you enroll in 2 residence units, fall and spring, and that's it. In some other degree programs, you are spreading out that degree over 3 or 4 semesters. So just take a look at how that's working. Understand that each and every semester that you are enrolled at Columbia, you must register for an enrollment category. The enrollment category is what actually defines you as an enrolled student at the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. So if you just register for 12 credits worth of coursework and no enrollment category, you're not a student yet. You won't have tuition and fees, you won't be enrolled in health insurance, and you won't be registered fully at the university. So you will appear as though you are not a student at all, despite having coursework. So make sure that the first thing that you're doing when you register in August, which is the first time that new students will be eligible, is the beginning of August. When you register, the first thing every semester that you should be adding to your schedule is the enrollment category that you intend to take for that semester. And again, as I mentioned before, this is the driver for your tuition and fees. So if you enroll in the full residence unit, that's full tuition. If you enroll in a half residence unit, that's essentially half tuition, and your underlying courses may align with that. But the courses themselves will not generate tuition and fees and will not recognize you as an enrolled student. So again, make sure that you're putting that enrollment category onto your registration every semester as you continue through your program at GSAS. Know that when you do register, that's when the tuition and fees are going to appear on your account for the enrollment category. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about an estimate. Again, these are estimated costs. Tuition and fees are actually expected, again, not to be final until June. We do have a good sense of what some of these fees are going to be. In particular, health insurance is something that gets finalized at the New York State level as well, so it may be a little bit later, but tuition and fees for the university are expected in June. Prior to that, everything that you're working with is going to be an estimate. So you can make a plan based on the estimate, and the actuals would be available again in June. So as I mentioned before, the direct costs would be the same for students across a program. So here's an example of a student who is enrolling in the Human Rights program. They're registering for the full residence unit each semester with underlying courses, but the resident unit is what is driving the tuition and fees. And the cost over the fall and spring is about the same. You'll notice that there's a difference, right? In the fall semester, you'll see that the health insurance cost is less than it is in the spring semester. That's because if you're enrolling in the university's health insurance, the fall charge is covering from mid-August, August 15th, when the health insurance becomes active, through December 31st. The spring charge is covering you from January 1st through August 14th. So if you enroll in the university's coverage, you do have year-round coverage if you're enrolled in both fall and spring, because the spring charge covers the summer. But that's why it's a little bit higher in the spring as well, because it's covering additional months beyond the spring semester. The other difference between the fall and spring charges is that in the fall semester, if this is the first time that you are attending Columbia, if you previously attended Columbia for undergraduate program or a prior master's degree, you were already assessed this fee, but there's a one-time charge assessed to your first semester of enrollment in the fall of $105. We expect that to still be $105. And that gives you access to transcripts and certifications in perpetuity. So this is a one-time charge in order for you to access your academic records, certifications for loans, or continuing enrollment, as well as access to requests for transcripts. What does this come up to in terms of your direct costs? So for the academic year, it's just under $85,000 for this student's example. Again, these are the direct costs that we expect to be billed to the student account where you would make payment of these. This estimated billing calculator can help you if you are sort of looking at maybe doing a half-time enrollment or full-time enrollment in one semester and half-time enrollment in another semester. So feel free to play around with that. Once we do have those final rates for next year and charges for next year, we'll update the calculator to include that as well, to include the new rates. But it'll give you a pretty good sense of what you're looking at if you want to play around with that now. The indirect costs. So these are the pieces where you may or may not have these exact costs. This is the estimate that's created by the Financial Aid Office in collaboration with the Central University of the cost that we expect a student to have in average over the course of the academic year for their living expenses. So housing, food, personal expenses, all of these costs that you would still have as a person that are not your directly charged things. Now, if you're in university housing, your housing will be charged. Your Columbia residential would be charged as if you were living elsewhere on a monthly basis, right? You'll get a monthly rent charge and you're responsible for paying on a monthly basis that rent charge. For those of you who are living off campus and not in Columbia residential housing, you are paying your landlord or management company directly for your rent. And if you are borrowing or receiving aid to the total cost of attendance, inclusive of these housing costs, you would receive a refund after classes have begun to use that in order to make those payments. So again, you'll see that there's a difference now between the fall and the spring. This is because underlying each semester are the number of months that are included. This is a 9-month academic year, and so the fall represents 4 months of the total cost, and the spring represents 5 months of the total cost. So the amount that you would potentially be eligible for in the fall versus the spring is slightly different to account for, again, the underlying costs of the months that are included in that semester. What's that come to for those direct costs? It's roughly $32,000 of eligibility to cover your fall and spring. Remember, this does not include summer. If you enroll next summer, that's a totally different semester. But this is for the fall and spring of this academic year, what you would expect to be eligible for in terms of indirect costs. The total then comes to about $116,000. 116,500 for that total year. This may or may not be your actual cost because, again, all of these indirect costs could align with maybe our estimate is higher or your actual costs are higher. But this is the total cost and the total estimated cost of attendance. This figure is the figure that we would use to for the total aid that you can receive from all sources. So scholarships, fellowships, federal work study if you are working on campus, though not other employment if you are working on or off campus, but federal work study specifically is included in this total cost of attendance, as well as scholarships, as well as any loans that you might take advantage of. So let's talk about some of the different funding types. The one that we have the most questions about, no surprise, are institutional fellowships. Again, those are made at the departmental level. So if you're receiving a scholarship or fellowship from Columbia, from your department. Some departments will be notifying students at the time of admission. Other departments notify students of scholarship or fellowship over the course of the summer separately from the admissions decision. Other departments may decide on funding opportunities after the fall semester has begun, right? The amount and availability of scholarships are limited for all departments. They are incredibly limited. But they are again done at the departmental level. So if you received a fellowship with your admissions letter, then you can certainly ask us if you have questions about how that's going to be distributed. If you have questions again about whether or not you are being considered for a fellowship and didn't receive that in your admissions letter, I would encourage you to be in contact with your department to see if departmental funds will be available. In addition to those, there are opportunities, other kinds of opportunities for funding in institutional funds from GSAS. When those opportunities become available, there's typically an announcement. Now, I say GSAS because often those announcements, again, are not coming from the financial aid office. They may be coming from another center or institute that works with GSAS or from our student affairs or access and engagement teams. So there are a number of places where those communications may come out. One of the things I would encourage you to do once the school year has begun in the fall, there is a bi-weekly newsletter that comes out for master's students. In that newsletter, opportunities for upcoming funding are announced. So I would make sure that you're taking a quick look at that newsletter every time it comes through, because anything that's coming up that you might be able to avail yourself of is going to be listed there as well. The other place that you might receive or see information about funding is from the university at large. The first opportunity that you would have access to is the interschool fellowships. That application process has actually opened. It did open as scheduled towards the end of this month. I think it was last week or the week before. So that is open. There's a deadline at the end of June. If you go to the upcoming fellowships webpage, which we're going to link to in just a second, you'll see that information about the interschool fellowships and the application process. Those fellowships are very specific. And so take a look at what those opportunities are and if you are eligible to apply for any of them based on the conditions for eligibility. The other award that's managed from Columbia University, but it's actually not from Columbia University, is the Dolores Liebman Fellowship. I'm bringing it up here because we do get a lot of questions about this opportunity. It's for up to 3 years. It's highly, highly, highly competitive. So it's an award that you can apply for at the university at large, right? Every Columbia University student who is a master's or PhD student can apply for this award. From the total of Columbia University, we are allowed to put forth 3 applications, and then the determination for the awardees is actually done by JP Morgan. So this is an award that's coordinated with Columbia University. We at the university do not actually determine who gets an award. Of all the applications that we receive, we are allowed to put forward 3 in total. I say this because it's a highly academic program. And because it's for 3 years, in many cases, if you're applying for it as a master's student, it's already too late, right? If you are planning to do a master's program and then transition to a PhD, perhaps something to really look at. But if you are doing a master's program where you're going to be completing in spring of 2027 or August of 2027, or even December of 2027 next fall, it's not going to work out for you because it's just not going to be providing you with that award during this current year. It's for next year already. So the December application was for the 25-26. When it opens again in December of 26, it's for the 27-28 academic year. There are other awards that are offered through the provost's office, so take a look at that as well. And then, as I mentioned previously, institutes and centers throughout Columbia may also have opportunities for which you can apply. Where to find these opportunities? So there are search engines out there. We do have some search opportunities listed on our website. I'll caution you that as you search using search engines, a lot of the awarding that's out there is for undergraduates, right? Organizations want their funds to go to someone getting a first degree. Everyone supports that. But what it means is that there really is a much more limited pool of funding for graduate studies. So as you're searching, know that even if you identify yourself as a graduate student, some of the results and returns that you receive for those fellowship opportunities may actually still be for undergrad. So use with caution. They can be helpful. There are awards out there. The place that I would actually start is with our upcoming fellowship and award opportunities. Most of the award opportunities that are listed there are listed because prior students have received them. And so that's part of the way that we become, as a school, aware of opportunities that are out there. The Graduate School of Arts and Sciences does have a dedicated fellowship office who helps to find these awards and post them onto the website, and can assist you if you have questions about any of these awards. This website that I'm linking to here of upcoming fellowships is maintained by their office. So certainly you can reach out again to financial aid or to the fellowship office directly if you have questions about the opportunities that are listed on this site. And the other place that I wanted to mention for opportunities that we want folks to think of are your own affinity groups and connections. A lot of undergraduate schools have alumni awards that are available. If you haven't looked into that from your alma mater for undergrad, definitely take a look at that. And other ways that you are connected in your community and your life, those are places where you may find that there are opportunities through your religious affiliation or church groups, or through other nonprofit volunteer organizations that you're working with. Just think broadly about who you are and where you're connected, as those may be other affinity groups that you're missing an opportunity on because you didn't know that they might have some funding that's available. So I've actually spoken this week with a student who didn't know that their undergraduate did have an opportunity, and they applied and were awarded. So again, a missed opportunity that we see in you guys coming from having already established, educational relationships and other relationships in your life that might afford you some other fellowship, scholarship, assistance, financial assistance. Now let's talk about the different work opportunities. First, for those of you who are U.S. citizens and permanent residents, and maybe you have or have not borrowed or have not taken advantage of, as an undergrad, the Federal Work Study program at the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, we do have Federal Work Study available. The way that Federal Work Study functions is that you would complete a FAFSA, whether you're deciding to borrow federal loans or not. If you want access to federal work study, you must complete the FAFSA. And then to qualify, federal work study is actually a need-based program. So it means we have to take the cost of attendance and subtract the calculated expected family contribution that FAFSA made, and then any other need-based scholarships that you have. If that difference, which for most of you will be true, if that difference is more than zero, you're eligible for federal work study for that amount. This impacts your eligibility for loans because the federal work study program is included in that total cost of attendance, right? So you can't double dip by borrowing and taking federal work study for the same amount. But federal work study is an option that you have available. If we apply the federal work study to your financial aid record, you still then go out and find a job on campus. There is a federal work study dedicated office at the university, and they maintain a website that has information about just different job opportunities that are becoming available. The reality is it's too soon right now. Sometime maybe late June, more likely sometime in July is when you're going to start seeing opportunities for the fall. We're still in spring and planning for summer, so there's nothing really out there right now for fall. We also haven't started to award any of the federal work study for fall. So if you did find an opportunity that was for fall, there's no federal work study associated with your record. So it's just a little too soon. But know that after we start the awarding process, if you are trying to take advantage of federal work study and you are eligible, that would be something that you can look at over the summer in terms of finding federal work study eligible employment. You get paid from your employer, whoever that on-campus employer is, and they take the subsidized federal work study from your student financial aid to subsidize the pay that they're giving you. So the financial aid office applies an allocation, but it doesn't disperse to you. It's actually just paid out as you're paid from your federal work study employment. In addition to federal work study and separate from federal work study, and something that both our domestic and international students may have access to, are departmental research assistant program or opportunities, as well as reading opportunities. So these are within the department. It's usually coordinated with faculty, and it may be competitive. Again, many of these opportunities are not yet determined for the fall because faculty don't know what their course load is going to look like. They may not know what their funding is going to look like. In some cases, these opportunities become available in like early October. But certainly, if you are looking at and considering and interested in any kind of employment within your department as a research assistant or a reader or a grader for undergraduate courses, self-identify within your department that you are interested in these opportunities. Not all departments will have the opportunities, but certainly, again, reach out to your specific department to understand if this is something that you can pursue, and so that your department is aware that you're someone who wants to pursue these opportunities when they become available. The next type of aid is the aid that nobody wants, right? The aid that you have to pay back, which are loans. So let's talk a little bit about the basics of how loans work. First, if you've never applied for loans before, that's okay. We're here to help you and assist you through that process. It's a little bit too soon right now, though there is some information that's out there this week in terms of private loans. But right now, our process hasn't begun. So you are just information gathering about the loan opportunities at this point in time. Later in May, early June, and again in June and July in earnest, the loan process will be underway. In part because we're waiting to make sure that we have the final costs before we certify loans that are up to that cost of attendance, because if the cost is reduced, then the amount we certify is incorrect, and there are all kinds of changes that would need to happen. So we will begin that loan processing again later in May and early June, and it continues throughout the summer. But some basics. You can apply for loans for the full academic year at once, right? So you can make a decision about what you need for both the fall and spring semester and apply for those borrowing needs at one time. That is what we encourage you to do, to make a plan for the whole year and apply once for what you need for the whole year. Obviously, your plans could change, right? Perhaps you intended to enroll full-time and now you're going to scale that back and enroll half-time. That would impact your eligibility and that total cost of attendance, and therefore may impact what you've borrowed or planned to borrow already that needs a reduction. The reverse could happen as well. Let's say you planned to enroll half-time, but now you're going to enroll full-time and you need to borrow more. Know that you can make a change at any point during this academic year while you're enrolled to either reduce borrowing that you have or increase borrowing that you have. Additionally, let's say you have financial resources to cover the full fall costs that you expect, but you know that you're going to need a little bit to borrow for the spring semester. You can borrow just in the spring semester as well. The loans that you have access to, unlike federal work study, where there is an actual calculation of your eligibility, for any of the direct unsubsidized loan or private educational loans that you have access to, there is no need-based calculation. So you could have an expected family contribution from FAFSA that's $1 million, and you could still borrow the direct unsubsidized loan provided you're otherwise eligible. So even if you have resources, these loan opportunities are available to you. If you have resources, it doesn't, again, knock you out of the eligibility to borrow. If that expected family contribution is, a couple $1,000s, you can still borrow against that. You can't borrow against scholarships, right? There's no double dipping on certain types of aid, but that expected family contribution that FAFSA creates only impacts your eligibility for federal work study in the terms of the calculation, and it doesn't impact your eligibility to borrow loans. For all of the loans that you have access to, the direct unsubsidized loan and private educational loans, the interest accrues from the date of disbursement on the amount that was dispersed. So as we saw before, you're going to be billed separately for the fall semester charges and the spring semester charges. Your loans will also be split up so that it's covering the fall semester charges or spring semester charges, depending again on whether you're borrowing for both semesters. In the case of a federal loan, we're required to split that between the fall and the spring semester if you're expected to be enrolled in both. But for a private loan, you could borrow just for one semester at a time if you so choose. If you didn't borrow in the fall and wanted to borrow in the spring in the direct unsubsidized loan, that's also an option that you'll have available. As I mentioned before, you can make reductions to these loans. Now, for the direct unsubsidized loan in particular, this loan has a very generous cancellation and return window. So let's say you've borrowed $5,000 in the direct unsubsidized loan for the fall semester, and then you receive a $2,500 scholarship from an external organization. If at that time you wanted to reduce the amount that you had borrowed of $5,000 in the fall down to $2,500 in the fall, and you collaborate with our office to do that, we send the $2,500 back to your federal loan servicer, and they treat that as though you never borrowed it. So remember, the interest was accruing from the date of disbursement. There was also potentially a fee associated with that loan. And at the time of the return, they wipe out the fee and they wipe out the interest that was accrued on the returned amount. So it would be as though you had always borrowed $2,500 from the beginning of the semester. So keep that in mind with regard to the federal loan in particular, that from the time that the funds disperse, you'll have 120 days on that disbursement. So the clock restarts in the spring semester in January with the second disbursement. From the time that that disbursement happens, you have 120 days to cancel, return any portion or all of it, and it'll be as though you never borrowed that returned amount. So that, since the interest is accruing from the beginning, that saves you on money when you make that reduction. Everybody wants to eliminate the amount that you've accrued in interest if you can. Of course, we encourage you to only borrow what you need. But in this instance, where you're taking advantage of the federal loan with the hopeful expectation that you might be able to reduce, you may choose to borrow more and then return. Just know that within yourself, if you're not going to return, you're going to be responsible for that interest. So make a plan accordingly, and we're happy to help you make that plan based on what you know. So let's talk about the direct unsubsidized loan. This is the federal loan option that will be available to students for next fall. The total that you're eligible for if you are enrolled full-time in both the fall and the spring semesters is $20,500. There is a 1.057% fee that is deducted from the disbursement. That means if you were enrolled full-time with 12 credits in the fall and full-time with 12 credits in the spring, you would be eligible for $10,142 in a net amount applied to your account. Now, if you have previously attended a graduate program and borrowed federal loans at that graduate program, The new federal program aggregate lifetime limits for graduate borrowing is $100,000. So let's say last year you attended another master's program and you borrowed $20,500 in the direct unsubsidized loan. That $20,500 reduces your eligibility in total from that $100,000, but you're still going to have $75,000 left, right? You're going to have eligibility to borrow in the direct unsubsidized loan if you haven't already at the graduate level borrowed $100,000. Currently, we don't know if this $100,000 is to include any graduate plus borrowing, but it may, which means if you attended a graduate program, again, undergraduate debt is fine. Whatever you've borrowed as an undergrad is what you've borrowed. No counting in that for this aggregate limit. But for the graduate limit, if you borrowed in the past year or in a prior degree program, even if you've paid it off, we will be looking at any graduate level borrowing in the federal program in order to determine how close you are or if you have exceeded this aggregate limit before we would be able to process any additional direct unsubsidized loans. So part of our delay as well is to confirm all of these final rules, which we expect to have happening at the end of May, beginning of June. But certainly no later than July 1st when the new rules are expected to take effect. So again, if you've previously borrowed, if you're concerned about your eligibility in accessing the direct unsubsidized loan as you enter this coming fall, please be in touch with our office and we can help to assist you in understanding that. However, at this point, we don't have your records for the next year, so it's still going to be a little bit later in May, but self-identify that you're concerned about your ability to borrow, and we can always set up a time to sort of talk about what these options are going to be. Additionally, if your plan is to enroll in your program part-time, for some programs, there is no part-time option. For other programs, you may be eligible to extend that program over a 2-year period and enroll like half-time or even less than half-time. Federal aid for the direct unsubsidized loan, as well as for the federal work study, means that you must be enrolled at least half-time. That means in order to access federal aid, federal work study, or the direct unsubsidized loan at all, to have just entry into this as a program, you must be enrolled in a semester of at least 6 credits. If you are really looking to do the program part-time and you're taking 3 or 4 credits each semester, you will not have access to the federal loans. You can borrow private loans, which we're going to talk about, but to be eligible for federal loans, there's a minimum of 6 credits required. In order to access the full amount, this $20,500 or $10,142 per semester, you have to have a minimum of 12 credits in each of those semesters. So if you enroll in 11 credits, our office is going to be required to prorate your eligibility based on the actual number of credits that you have in your enrollment. That is our, again, current understanding of this new process. The Department of Education has sort of put forth a calculation of how this would work. As you might expect, at 6 credits, you'll be eligible for roughly half. Again, half in each semester, meaning instead of the 10,142 or 10,250, you'll be eligible for a gross amount of 5,125 if you are enrolled half-time. So if you've previously enrolled and borrowed federal loans, if you were a half-time enrollee, you could still access the maximum amount in unsubsidized loans. That is no longer the case moving forward. So if you are looking to take advantage of the maximum amount in federal aid, you have to be enrolled full-time in each semester that you want to take advantage of that. Currently, the federal direct unsubsidized loan has a fixed interest rate of 7.94%. It's based on when the loan disperses, and it changes every July 1st. So for you guys, the interest rate that we expect for fall loans, which will disperse after July 1st, the interest rate will be set sometime at the end or middle of May for that July 1st rate. But currently it's 7.94%. It's looking to be very similar for next year, but it's based on the 10-year Treasury bill sale in mid-May. So we won't know what that interest rate is for next year until probably the end of May, early June, again, when most of this process will begin. At that point, you would be able to decide whether or not you wanted to borrow the direct unsubsidized loan, comparing that to other private educational loans that you might have access to. But certainly, if you're thinking about taking advantage of federal aid, know that you need to, in order to maximize that, be enrolled in at least 12 credits. If you're enrolling in anywhere between 6 credits and 12 credits, you will have a prorated amount of eligibility with the federal direct unsubsidized loan. Student Financial Services has created a website to track the changes as we learn of them. It's our best understanding of what is there now. Again, final rules are expected at the end of May, early June. But if you are looking at, taking advantage of federal loans, this is the place where we're going to understand in the end what those opportunities are going to look like and what that calculation is going to look like. Our office also offers a loan information session. Historically, that's happened in July. We'll probably do something in later June and maybe repeat that again in July for additional opportunities since there are so many changes. But know that we will have a dedicated loan session. It's going to happen after we have all of these final rules. So those of you who know that you're going to borrow but haven't quite figured out your plan yet, more information is forthcoming as we receive that. So the other type of loan that you have access to are private educational loans. And again, private educational loans for U.S. citizens and permanent residents, generally you won't need a cosigner. These private educational loans, unlike the federal loans, which always have a fixed interest rate, you may have opportunities for a fixed or variable interest rate. It's based on the lender. You may be offered both a variable and fixed interest rate when you apply to these loans. It may also be tied to the repayment term that you select. So for example, if you apply with a lender, they may offer you a series of different options, and you'll notice that the lowest interest rate is associated with the shortest repayment term. So your total monthly payment will be much higher, but you'll pay a lot less over time. This is something that you would be looking at as you are exploring these different options. Most lenders do have a tiered rate structure, meaning they offer different interest rates based on where you fall in terms of your credit score. Fees also may vary across these different lenders. Again, the federal loans, everybody gets the same rate, everybody gets the same fee. Private loans, it's based on who you are as a borrower. As I mentioned before, usually domestic students who have good credit wouldn't necessarily need a creditworthy cosigner. However, 2 signatures are always better than 1 in terms of risk assessment from the lender. So if you do have someone who is a creditworthy cosigner that could sign and you're looking at doing that, it may offer you a more preferential interest rate. But as I mentioned before, for most of our students, you wouldn't need a U.S. citizen or permanent resident as a cosigner if you yourself are a citizen or permanent resident. With these loans, you can borrow, again, up to that total established cost of attendance, minus any other aid that you already received, and subject to that lender's specific aggregate limit approval, right? If you've previously borrowed and are already highly leveraged in educational debt, the private lender may limit your borrowing. But most private lenders are looking to the school to say, what is the cap on the amount that this student may borrow? And the school is saying it is the total cost of attendance. Right now, it's a little too soon to apply, as I've sort of mentioned. This process really kicks off sometime a little bit later in May. But in the next week, on that Student Financial Services webpage that's linked at the bottom of this, as well as the Student Financial Services page that's outlining different changes, there is information about private loans. We expect private lenders to put their products out this coming week. What you'll see when you visit that, when it's updated for the 26-27 year, are two different, if you are a domestic student, you will see two different options. One will be a very short list of only two lenders as the preferred lending list, and then a historical lending list of other lenders that Columbia University students have used over the past several years. Why is it set up that way? So these preferred lenders have worked with and committed to Columbia in the broad approval of programs across the university. So they're being put forth because they have indicated the broadest approval that we are expecting. For some of the other lenders that you'll see on the historical list, they may be choosing, as is their right as a lender, to lend to only certain populations, right? They may only lend to professional students who are in the business school or law school or medicine. But for these first two lenders that you're going to see listed for domestic students, you'll see that they are approving across all different MA program types. It doesn't limit you to those two lenders. Again, that historical list is available. That's not an exhaustive list. There are other lending opportunities for private loans that are out there. If, for example, the state of residence from which you are coming has a loan program, you may want to explore that. I know, for example, that I've had students who are from Texas, and Texas has a loan program called Brazos. There are other state-based programs that may be advantageous for you. The other thing that you could look at, which you will not see listed on either maybe on the historical, but certainly not on the preferred, are credit unions. If you belong to a credit union, there may be better interest rate or more competitive interest rate opportunities for you as a member of that credit union. So as you go to exploring the different lending options, know that what we're providing is a guide. We're providing you with a couple of lenders that we know are going to be expanding their lending to account for our U.S. citizens and permanent residents, that sort of loss of the federal graduate plus loan for next year. But also that they are broadening to consider programs that perhaps those lenders may not have considered in the past due to risk. So that information is forthcoming. There is some information, again, out there as a reminder for the private loans that you would be borrowing. The interest is going to accrue from the date that the funds are dispersed on the amount that's dispersed. So be mindful, if you don't need the funding right away and you only need a small portion for the fall, delaying your borrowing or delaying the bulk of borrowing to a later time helps you on interest. For our international students, I want to stress that currently there are two no cosigner options through Prodigy Finance and Empower Financing. However, not all international students are going to be eligible for no cosigner options. Those two lenders have restricted their lending to a very exclusive group of potential countries and or programs. So if you are an international student and you are looking to avail yourself of a no cosigner private loan option, I would look to these two lenders to see if you will be considered, but know that it is a very, very limited scope of international students with which you can apply. I would also encourage you to look at any home country government assistance, right? So for example, Canadian students may have access to provincial loans based on where you are from, based on your province of residence. There may be other federally based loan opportunities depending, again, on where you are from. You may also want to, as with that idea of being a member of a credit union, speak with your local bank. Again, for Canadian students, TD Bank has had a student line of credit for their students for a while. So there may be other opportunities from your local banking institution that you might want to explore. The private loans, all of the pieces of the private loans that I discussed for domestic students is the same for international students, except that you are required to have a U.S. citizen or permanent resident as a creditworthy cosigner to access those private loans. So what you have access to without a cosigner is going to be incredibly limited if you have access to these two lenders at all. If you have a cosigner, you will have access to a number of different lenders. As an international student who would be exploring these with your cosigner, one of the things that you will want to compare across the different lending options, private lending options, is whether or not that lender has a release of the cosigner. For some lenders, they never release the cosigner, and the cosigner is always then obligated, should something happen to you, to make good on that loan. However, in some cases, the private lender has a release after you make X number of payments. So maybe you make 24 on-time payments or 36 on-time payments, and then your cosigner is now released from that obligation. Again, same terms as before, you may be able to access either a fixed interest rate or a variable interest rate. It may be tied to your repayment plan. There's very likely a tiered structure in terms of how the rates are determined. And unless the lender limits you based on their own internal aggregate limit, you would be eligible to borrow up to the full cost of attendance minus any other scholarship, fellowship, or loans that you might be receiving. So for our international students, again, if you have a creditworthy cosigner, you will have more options available. Otherwise, you can look at these two no cosigner options to see if you would potentially be able to qualify. Timing, next steps. What do we need to do? So first, check the online resources that we've talked about and make sure that you're in contact with your department about any institutional scholarship funding. Again, as a reminder, your department may have very limited or no funds. That's not their default. It's just the way that it has worked out. Some departments have more funding available than others. Some departments make their decision at the time of admissions, others do that later. So the best resource for you is to be in touch with your department about what internal funding opportunities they have. Again, right now you're kind of just making a plan to see how much you might need to borrow. As I mentioned before, we'll have a dedicated loan session in July at the latest, hopefully by late June when we have information, final rules about all of the federal changes. But know that we will have a more in-depth loan dedicated session where we'll talk about how do I determine which of these private lenders might be best for me, or if I'm eligible for both the direct unsubsidized loan and private loans, how do I determine whether I want both types of loans, only the unsubsidized loan if that meets my needs, or only a private loan if that meets my needs. We'll talk in detail in that session about how to make an informed decision about the borrowing options that you have. If you're a U.S. citizen and permanent resident, you can complete the FAFSA. The FAFSA for the 26-27 academic year became available in October of 2025, so that's out there. Know that there are two FAFSAs out there, so if you went and you completed the 25-26, we won't have that. But we won't have access to that if you are entering next fall. So we do need the 26-27. Currently, we are not looking at any of that information. We cannot confirm if we've received your FAFSA. You do not exist in our financial aid system until sometime later next month. But you can complete the FAFSA. In addition, if you know that you are going to borrow the direct unsubsidized loan at whatever eligibility you have, you can also, in addition to the FAFSA, complete the entrance counseling and master promissory notes that are there. Reminder, the direct unsubsidized loan will be prorated based on your enrollment. So if you are looking to maximize, you have to enroll and maintain at least 12 credits each semester in order to access that maximum amount. And you may have reduced eligibility based on prior borrowing, which again, we'll be looking at that when we start to review FAFSA information later in May. Private loans, you can complete an application directly with the lender of your choice. While you could start that right now, I really do recommend waiting. The application and approval process is like 24 to 48 hours. You'll know right away. You'll know very quickly what you were approved for and what options you have available to you. So while some of you may be hoping to do this right now, like yesterday, it will still be late May, early June before we're going to be positioned to certify those loans. So your lender is going to be holding that and contacting you saying it hasn't been certified for the next month and a half at least. So if you are, looking to make a decision, I strongly encourage you to just wait. If you just can't wait because you need to know if you're going to be approved or not, certainly you can apply for those loans, but know that you're not going to get confirmation, neither is your lender until we begin to process those. So the process of the certifications of loans, the process by which we are going to be eligible to review eligibility for the direct unsubsidized loan is all being set up and waiting on these new rule finalizations. So the delay is because we don't have the ability right now to make the absolute informed correct decision on your eligibility because final rules are not available. I do encourage you to check your credit report if you have not done that. You wouldn't want to be surprised by something that was either an error or a delinquency that you just weren't aware of in your credit report at the time that you apply. I strongly encourage you to take a look if you haven't yet at your credit report. There are places where you can get it for free. You can also get your credit score. That's a little less relevant because it's just driven by what's in your credit history. But I do strongly encourage you, if you haven't recently or you don't have already some credit monitoring, to take a look at what your credit score is, to take a look at your credit history in particular, to make sure that there is nothing there. A little anecdote, my name used to be Kate Smith. Credit scoring is credit reporting at the 3 different credit bureaus in the United States is done first by last name and then by social security number. I woke up one day and had a $70,000 vehicle that was repossessed that I never had in my credit report, and I had to fight to have that removed, and it does take some time. So do this now before you're applying for any private loans. Check your credit report, make sure everything is what it's supposed to be. If you find something that's an error, reach out to that credit bureau directly. If you have questions or concerns about that, also feel free to reach out to us and we can help assist you. Again, we are not going to start processing anything for the fall until May at the earliest, and not until final published rules, which are not expected until the end of May, early June, are set forth by the Department of Education. Your first billing notification, right? Now you've borrowed, you've got everything in place. Your first billing notification is going to happen in mid-August, and the first bill due date for the fall semester is going to be in mid-September. You still have time, obviously, to make all of the decisions. We're going to have another loan and billing information session in August where we talk about what it looks like on your bill, what to expect from your bill based on your registration, and how to determine your billing if you haven't registered because you maybe still have a hold, which we're going to talk about. The billing schedule is published again and managed by Student Financial Services. They determine the deadline date. They will not change your individual deadline date. So know what the deadline date is. That is the deadline for all students at Columbia. If you are borrowing or receiving an institutional scholarship from your department, you should see those as anticipated credits, provided that the department, as I mentioned, some departments do their awarding a little bit later, but provided that the department has informed financial aid of the awards. When that first billing notification comes out in mid-August, you should actually see it. The anticipated credits for your scholarships or fellowships. Your tuition deposit is applied to the fall, as well as your housing deposit if you're in Columbia Residential. By the way, the Columbia Residential application deadline for new applicants or new students to be considered for housing for fall is May 14th. Make sure that if you want to be If you want to consider taking advantage of Columbia Residential Housing that you have submitted an application, you must have already accepted your program and deposited. So you have to be an accepted, not just an admitted student. But once you have accepted, May 14th is the deadline to apply for housing for the fall. So make sure that you do that if that's something that you're looking to do. There are payment plan options available for the fall and spring semesters. That information is again managed by Student Financial Services. It is through your student account, which is SSOL, the Student Services Online. But you can't do anything with regard to the payment plan until July. If you look there now, you will see the information about how that payment plan functioned for this year, and we expect it to function similarly for next year. You have holds on your account as you come into school, right? So if you have not submitted your final transcripts to admissions by August 1st, you will have a hold on your account and you will not be able to register and you will not be a student until you have cleared that final transcript deadline. It will prevent you from registration. You also have until August 1st if you decide that you want to defer. You have to first accept the offer of admission and then submit a request for deferral. And that again is an August 1st deadline. Sorry about that. The other hold that you will have on your account is for immunization requirements. Do this now, folks. Gathering your immunization records and submitting them in August means you are going to be waiting. Your hold will be in place because there is one Columbia Health and one immunization clearance record office for the entire university. The sooner you get this in, the less likely it will impact your eligibility to register in the fall. So if you haven't already looked at what the immunization requirements are, look at them. If you haven't already thought about where you're going to gather those records from, do that. In many cases, your undergraduate institution may have required this, and they might be the first place for you to reach out. But know that for some students, this takes a while, and you cannot register if you have the immunization requirements still outstanding. Additionally, if you're a current Columbia student as an undergrad or prior master's program, make sure that you've resolved any holds from your prior enrollment before you come to attend GSAS. Don't forget, when you register, that you have to, each semester, add an enrollment category. If you register for classes, credits only, you're not a student. You don't have health insurance. You don't have access to campus. We just don't recognize you as a student. Even if your financial aid is there on your record and you have borrowed private loans or federal loans, we cannot refund you because you have not had tuition assessed unless you have the enrollment category. So again, first thing you register for, first thing that goes to your schedule each semester is an enrollment category. I don't have any tuition charges. I just got my bill. You didn't register for an enrollment category. My financial aid didn't come yet. I'm waiting for my refund. Where is it? You don't have an enrollment category and we can't release it. So again, you have to enroll in this registration, the enrollment category every semester, or you're not a student. For federal aid, as a reminder, minimum of 6 credits, 12 or more gets you the full amount. But if you have between 6 and 12, you're not going to have access to the full direct unsubsidized loan. If you have fewer than 6, you do not have access to any federal aid. So if you're planning on going part-time, your borrowing and work opportunities do not include federal work study and do not include any federal aid. So what you're going to do now, connect with the folks that you have in your department, with our office, and make a plan for what you're going to do for next year. And now we're at our little Q&A. I see that many of you have been putting some questions into the information. So I'm going to stop this sharing and maybe go into a few of these. Let's see. Okay, so when does repayment begin? That's a great question. Great question. And this for repayment for federal loans, you begin repayment 6 months following graduation, or, and this is important, 6 months following dropping below half-time enrollment. That means if you enroll full-time in the fall, full-time in the spring, and then you enroll part-time in the summer, the last time that you were full-time enrolled was the spring. Even though you're still in classes until the end of August, your 6-month grace period started at the end of the spring semester. So be aware of that. It's 6 months from when you complete the degree and are no longer enrolled, or withdraw and are no longer enrolled, or drop below half-time enrollment. That's the 6-month grace period start on loans. For private educational loans, the vast majority of private lenders also have a 6-month grace period to align with federal loans. There have been in the past one lender who had a 9-month grace period. I don't think that that's going to continue. So again, generally speaking, you have 6 months from dropping below half-time enrollment or from graduating before you will begin the repayment. If you don't have a lot of credit history, because this is something that's new, your eligibility for the direct unsubsidized loan is not impacted. There is no credit inquiry for the direct unsubsidized loan. For private loans, if you don't have a lot of established credit history, but you don't have bad credit, we expect that you will be eligible with those two preferred lenders, meaning as long as you don't have bad credit, adverse credit, bankruptcies, tax liens, collections, negative things on your credit report, but you don't have a lot of credit history, we expect that you will still qualify for private lending as a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. For international students, it's going to be driven by your creditworthy cosigner. Although the private lender may do a credit check on you as an international person, you may or may not have established credit history in the United States, and so it will be driven by your creditworthy cosigner in terms of whether you're approved or not. Why is there a difference in tuition for different programs? That's way above my pay grade in terms of the way that those programs were developed. But yes, you will notice that in some programs, there's a different rate of tuition. That's why I said the rate of tuition and direct charges is based both on the program of study as well as your enrollment level. But for those students who are in a program, all of you will have the same information, the same charges, direct charges, if you are enrolled at the same level. A couple of other questions here. Some questions from our RSVPs, a couple of those. Let's see. And I've got just a couple more minutes and then we'll go. So please, if you have any other questions in the queue, please put those in the Q&A. Oh, great question. Can I pay off any loans that I take early without penalty? 100%. None of the loans that you are accessing have a prepayment penalty. What does that mean? That means if you borrow a private loan, for example, or the federal direct unsubsidized loan, and you select on that private loan a repayment term of 15 years, and you decide, or something happens where you have the ability to pay that loan off following after graduation within 6 months, or you pay it off in 5 years, you will not be responsible for the interest that would have accrued over the 15-year period, right? And so that decreases the total cost that you have of the interest that would have accrued, but you won't be responsible. You are responsible for the interest that's accrued to date. If you are in repayment on loans, and you're looking to pay them off, your lender will almost always provide you with a payoff amount because interest is accruing at the time between billing cycles, so that payoff amount will vary. But that's one of the things for you to think. Is it best to try and pay interest while you're in school? Absolutely, because here's how interest will work. On the direct unsubsidized loan, the interest is going to accrue as simple interest, meaning you borrowed $20,500 for the year, and the interest that's accruing is based on the $20,500, my apologies, that you've borrowed over the course of time. The interest is only using that original principal, not the other interest that's accrued. Shortly before you enter repayment, this interest that's been accruing on the original principal as simple interest will be added to that principal. And now you're going to accrue interest on the combined original principal, unpaid interest, your new principal balance in repayment, which is accruing interest on interest. So, does it benefit you? Yes. At the time of capitalization, if you've paid some of the interest that's been accruing over time before you enter repayment, the total that you'll pay on will be less. The reality, many of you will not have an opportunity to pay interest while you're in school because otherwise, why are you borrowing, right? However, you may have an opportunity during your grace period, at which point capitalization may not have occurred. Capitalization can occur at the time when you have a change in status, meaning graduation, or you finish your degree, or you stop enrollment, or at the time of repayment. For private loans, it's important for you to understand for the lender when capitalization is going to occur. Right now, private lenders are not like credit cards. They are not accruing and capitalizing the interest on a monthly basis. At most, when you are in repayment, these lenders are capitalizing interest every 3 months, every quarter. However, prior to that, it could be simple interest, it could be every quarter. It depends on the private lender. So something that you would want to look at. Are we going to send out a recording? No, we're not going to email a recording because our admissions process is actually still ongoing. So this recording will be available on our website. If you have activated your uni, you'll be able to see that. It'll be on the MA financing page as well, so you'll be able to see that session. Okay, so I'm going to do two more questions. We've got a few more. Okay, so do the loans or can the loans cover the admissions fee, meaning the deposit that you pay? So you cannot currently borrow a loan in order to pay your deposit. You have to borrow or you have to pay the deposit. However, the deposit, as I mentioned before, is getting applied to your student account in the fall. If you borrow for that total cost of attendance, you're going to get a refund of the deposit that you paid, right? Anything that you borrow in excess of the directly charged tuition and fees on your account may be eligible to be refunded to you. Again, we can't give you refunds until you've registered appropriately, but if you've paid your tuition deposit, but you need to, borrow to have that refunded to you, when you borrow in the total cost of attendance, a refund for the deposit would be available. Okay, let's do one more questions. One more question. Um, So, job search questions. Folks, we've got a really great dedicated team within Compass. If you have questions about jobs, they offer an information session in August to talk about how they engage with you as a master's student. So that's something that you would want to check in with Compass, which is the career management team here at GSAS. And I love that you guys in your RSVPs say things like, I'm just very excited and looking forward to everything. I think I'll end on that. We're also very excited to have you come. We're very excited to have final rules about how everything's going to work for next year and to get back in front of you with more information later in May and in early June and throughout the summer. So please know that we are here as a resource if you have individual questions. Each of you is coming to Columbia with a unique financial situation, with unique financial resources, with a unique opportunity that you want to pursue. So we want to meet with you as an individual after you get this general guidance. Please feel free to reach out to us. As I mentioned before, this information will be available on the website, so you'll be able to see this, but we're looking very much forward to welcoming you to Columbia this fall. We hope you have a great rest of the day and a great summer leading up to your registration.